又翻嚟我哋黑木崖嘅唔知第幾節。咁我哋頭先講到咧就係話第三節多謝呢個技術小姐呢個提示。咁我哋咧呢個第三節，咁之前都提到啦，譬如有好多嘅問題啦，譬如資本主義因為佢嗰發展嘅邏輯咯，令到我哋永遠都唔會停落嚟。就譬如我哋，就算我哋嘅技術啊，或者係資源幾咁豐富或者咁進步都好啦，唔會令到我哋人咧多咗一啲時間做第啲嘢。相反咧，我哋會用翻同樣嘅時間咧去去做生產啦，而生產同時需要資源啦，就令到我哋嗰個資源嘅耗用咧係越嚟越大。咁喺面對呢個咁嘅背景啦，我哋譬如核危機可能就會因此而成為一個結構性嘅問題，即係唔單止係核危機，因為如果我哋話其實唔單止係核嘅，可能有第二啲嘢㗎，即係我哋諗啲新嘅方法出嚟製造新嘅能源。咁但係即係好奇怪咧，就係我哋一啲大即係好強嘅能源嘅開發咧，都係連帶住一啲好大嘅 risk factor， 即係每一次都總係咁。咁然後如果係面對咁嘅處境嘅話咧，咁我哋就逼住咧，我哋猛咁製造一啲好大嘅 risk 出嚟。而核電咧就係其中一個好明顯嘅例子。咁但係有啲人會 argue 喎，咁我哋咪搞 renewable resources 咯 ，why not？ 即係譬如奧巴馬就出嚟搞 green power、green energy。
Yeah, but I mean the problem with Obama is that a lot of what he says is actually just kind of sugar-coated rhetoric. A lot of environmental groups actually assessed Obama's bill, said that in effect Obama's bill is actually worse for the environment than the previous policy because of all the favorable policies that he's developed for the automobile industry, which will effectively accelerate petrol consumption in the United States. But I mean, even with renewable energy, it's an interesting question for us to ask because not only like if we want to develop renewable energy sources and force politicians to devote a lot more of their budget to developing renewable energy sources. First of all, renewable energy sources are extremely expensive. I wrote this down too. Yeah. In order for us to rechannel fossil fuel consumption to solar power energy, for example, it would be equivalent to spending $220 for a barrel of oil. And this would require 32% of the global GDP, which would require, you know, a huge cut across the world of all kinds of goods and services.
即係根據我哋而家嘅技術水平。
Right.
我哋譬如我哋用油去生產去發電咁先算啦。如果我哋完全變咗做呢個 solar energy 即係太陽能咧，咁就直接等於我哋啲油無端端飆咗去240蚊美金。
Right, and for wind energy, we would require 26% of the world GDP, which would be equivalent to paying $180 for a barrel of oil. So you can see by the kind of logic of capitalism itself, it is virtually impossible for us to put forward a proposal to say, okay, well, you have to develop renewable energy because the cut in the profit margin and the amount of austerity that this would impose on the global economy at the current rate of consumption of energy is huge. But it's not just that, but renewable energy like wind and solar power is, first of all, it's not very efficient. Because, first of all, there are only certain areas in the world where you have an abundance of sun or wind. Second of all, even in those places, sun and wind are intermittent. It's not all the year round, right? And the amount of cost you would need to kind of to store wind and solar energy is very expensive. And but the other thing is that to develop renewable energy, you also need non-renewable resources. You also need certain non-renewable metals. So all of these questions are very, very, very interrelated. But the one kind of important factor that we all kind of should remember is that capitalism is based on sustaining a certain rate of growth and a certain rate of profit. And if certain energy sources cannot be proven by the market to be financially profitable, then the likelihood of these things being adopted is extremely small. And to sustain this rate of profit, it also needs to run on increasing amounts of energy, because for this continuous accumulation will require escalating amounts of energy.
即係譬如我哋而家譬如講中國咁先算啦，即係中國喺08年嘅金融風暴之後，好強調一樣嘢叫保8啊，即係我哋要保持每年嘅經濟增長有8%。咁但係其實倒翻轉頭，我要諗一個問題就係，如果我哋嘅 GDP 不停咁增加8%嘅話，即係話我哋所需要嘅資源啊，同時間都係 proportionate 咁樣增加緊，即係無論係人力啦，亦或係自然資源都好。咁呢啲全部都係要電，即係講到尾都係要能源。咁即係話我哋一路都我哋要保8，因為點解唔保8係唔得嘅咧？因為中國係會崩潰嘅，即係首先經濟會崩潰啦，然後經濟崩潰之後，好快我哋嘅政治啦同埋社會都會隨之而有好極大嘅混亂。咁當然北京最驚嘅就係即係社會混亂啦嚇，咁呢個係佢不能接受。所以保8呢個經濟嘅要求背後係一個政治嘅目的，係一個政治嘅原因。咁所以譬如喺中國呢個 particular 即係一個特定嘅環境裏面先算啦，佢係唔能夠接受咧我哋去減慢嗰個經濟嘅發展。咁所以如果唔能夠減慢經濟發展，我哋一定要持續每年有8%嘅經濟增長嘅話咧，咁即係話我哋嗰個能源嘅嗰個需求咧係一路要帶動。咁所以 in a sense 咧，即係我媽講嗰啲都係合理㗎，即係如果對某一啲人嚟講，即係對於你要保持呢個政權嘅穩定嚟講咧，呢個係一個必要嘅代價。點解？因為如果我哋一定要保8先可以即係呢個共產黨先唔會冧檔。咁然後我哋一定要有能源先可以保到8，即係譬如你走出嚟話，喂，我哋搞風力啦，我哋搞呢個太陽能啦，咁佢貴得滯啊嘛，即係個能源咁貴嘅時候，我哋保唔到8㗎喎，係嘛？咁但係唔保8咧，我哋政權就冧檔。咁所以冇計啦，我哋唔好搞嗰啲咩再生能源啊，我哋揾啲平啲嘅方法搞掂佢。咁所以而家大陸最多嘅能源就係其中最平嘅就係煤啦，煤同埋油係最多嘅。咁但係煤其中另外即係全世界而家都出名嘅就煤係一個最污染嘅一個發電嘅方式之一。咁所以而家講到最後，即係中國就有啲新嘅發展，就所謂要搞核。咁但係其實背後都逃唔過一樣嘢，就係我哋為咗發展，即係為咗唔能夠放棄我哋發展嘅部分啦，就要逼我哋一定要冒好多嘅風險啦，或者耗用好多嘅自然資源。即係譬如如果大家相信環保嘅話，即係你覺得喂環保真係好重要。人類嘅發展咧，即係尤其是大陸，即係有時好多電影咧，流行電影都有㗎，即係呢個 pop 嘅 film 都有，即係無端都會話，而家中國呢個沙漠化好嚴重，或者啲水土流失得好嚴重啊，blah blah blah blah。但係其實諗翻轉頭，背後係有一個政治嘅原因，因為正如我頭先所講，如果你唔能夠保8嘅，佢就冧檔啦，佢一定要保8啊嘛，所以佢一定要狂搶啲資源啦，壓榨啲人啦，過度開發啦，然後咁樣先可以保持佢呢個國家嘅一路嘅穩定。咁而呢個咁嘅機器就會令到成個中國嘅嗰個自然資源不停咁耗損落。而呢個背後係一個政治原因，即係佢唔純粹係話我哋貪婪啊，或者係我哋唔知點樣，而係因為我哋一方面咧有一個獨裁嘅政權啦，另一方面我哋要符合一個所謂資本主義嘅發展嘅規則。而呢個咧就係我諗而家中國面對好大嘅。
Yeah, I think you kind of you made a very good point. Kind of saying that the growth rate of China is immensely important for kind of preserving its political legitimacy. Right, exactly, because it is the one kind of galvanizing force that unites the Chinese people as such. Because it's all kind of premised on this kind of trickle-down theory, where it's like, okay, well, if there's enough prosperity, one day you will also be able to get a piece of this huge growth rate. But to kind of get a sense of how unsustainable China's growth is for the global economy, right now China's current rate of energy consumption is consuming 15% of world's total consumption of energy. In 15 years, this will be 30%. In 30 years, this will be 50% of the entire world's energy budget, basically. And this is very, very clearly unsustainable. And by 2020, China could stand to emit twice as much greenhouse gases as the rest of the world combined together. So
即係70%嘅溫室氣體都係我哋排放啊，到時就。
Right. So, and I mean I mean, you know, I told you the other day where I had this conversation with my aunt, and my aunt was saying something like, China has always been a self-contained country. We don't go conquering the rest of the world. So if China becomes a new hegemonic world power, we won't go around with all these imperialist practices like England or the USA. We will effectively have a peaceful world. But this is totally false, you know, because China is not able to sustain its model of economic growth with its own resources. And like, you know, we know that China is this massive export economy, and it runs virtually almost entirely on exports. And China has effectively cut out all the other export markets like in Latin America, Mexico, and all these countries who effectively have had to compete with much cheaper Chinese goods. And China is effectively enforcing a kind of imperialist system on these Latin American countries or Mexico, because these countries are now becoming countries that supply raw materials to China. And of course we all know that China is in Africa trying to monopolize, you know, like arable farmland, because it's slowly destroying all of its own agricultural land through desertification or the eutrophication of water and all this kind of stuff.
其實你頭先講呢個好明顯係，即係我覺得，因為前嗰輪咧有好多人講，即係譬如10年前有好多人話，有咩中國模式啊，即係而家咧好多嘅發展中國家應該學中國。因為中國咧就係佢哋嘅未來啦，咁你應該咧就係所謂出口導向，你生產用你廉價勞工去生產一啲嘢出嚟咁賣，咁你就會賺錢，咁你就可以發展到啦。咁但係其實即係呢個所謂嘅中國模式，其實好多人想像中就可以應用喺咩地方？應用喺啲比中國更落後嘅地方，譬如非洲啦，或者係某一啲南美嘅政權唔穩定嘅地方啦。咁但係其實呢個咧，如果我哋用所謂譬如世界理論嘅講法，即係 world system 嘅講法，因為其實點解中國會變成一個咁樣嘅發展模式咧？係因為美國首先 outsource 咗啲嘢俾我哋嘛，即係首先係美國人將佢嘅生產外判咗俾中國，咁然後我哋咁平咁就幫佢生產。咁但係呢一個咧其實係並唔係一個即係個發展嘅過程嚟嘅，呢個其實係一個國際嘅分工嚟嘅，即係有啲國家咧係負責出 idea 嘅，譬如美國係諗到整 iPhone 嘅，咁你嗰班友就唔識諗整 iPhone 嘅，佢亦都冇興趣令到你識得整 iPhone。佢係令到你可以跟住佢個圖表就整咗出嚟，佢拎翻俾自己國家賣。咁然後再嚟咧就仲有第二啲國家咧，佢哋係負責俾 resources， 跟住負責俾自然資源嘅，譬如俾金屬啊、俾煤礦啊、俾能源你。咁另外有一個好重要嘅就啱啱提到嘅就所謂糧食嘅問題。其實中國而家已經係其中一個好大嘅糧食入口國。即係我哋雖然話以農立國，但係我哋大量糧食都係入口嘅。咁呢一次時間差唔多啦，下一次咧可以再詳細啲講下。由中國所發展出嚟嘅經濟模式咧，點樣影響全世界嘅經濟格局？